All right, this is your lecture on capitalization, italics, abbreviations, and numbers. All right, so we're going to start with proper nouns. Of course, most proper nouns are names of people, places, organizations, and commercial brands. Other proper nouns include titles of books, songs, musical recordings, movies, and video games. Names of specific animals, names of planets, stars, and other astronomical features, seagoing ships, and spacecraft. Holidays and some important dates are proper nouns too. So I'm going to give you a list of things that should be capitalized. I'm going to hold this up, okay, so that you can look at it as we kind of go over it. So personal names like Jose, Anya, Jane, Lincoln, Smith, Beyonce, Cher, Crystal, John, personal names. Places like Tokyo and Mexico and New York City and Greenville and Seoul and Redwood City and Indian Ocean, Mississippi River and Southern California. Media. And I've made a separate list for media over here. So, because those are the kind of things that we deal with the most in the type of writings that we do. I'll hold that too high. I'm trying to hold it steady. Video games like Minecraft, musical recordings like the White Album, novels like, which one did I put on there? The Life of Anne Boleyn. Television shows like Supernatural and NCIS Los Angeles. Movies like Star Trek The Next Generation. Well, that's a TV series, isn't it? What did I put on there? On Friday the 13th. Okay. Notice the punctuation that I use too. When you are printing, you can't italicize, right? So you underline when you're hand printing. So that's how come those are underlined like that, because I can't italicize when I'm printing by hand. Okay. Use quote marks for like television series, song titles. You kind of think big to small. Television series are smaller than movies. So television series, you use quotation marks, where a movie, you would underline. Same thing with short stories, would have quotation marks around them, where bigger, larger novels and books would be underlined. Okay, it's the same thing in poetry. Sonnets, smaller poems have quotation marks around them, or long epic poems like Beowulf, The Raven, they are actually italicized. Even though they're considered poems, they're italicized because they're very long poems. Okay? All right, after media, again, is organizations like Electric Frontier Foundation, which is a non-governmental digital rights advocacy group. Doctors Without Borders, that's a non-governmental aid organization. House of Representatives, which is a U.S. legislative body. M16, which is the British spy agency. Seacraft and spacecraft like the HMS Bounty. It's a seacraft. That was in Mutiny on the Bounty, of course. Challenger, which was the spacecraft. The USS Enterprise, which is actually a real seagoing aircraft carrier and a fictional spacecraft. Things in outer space, like the moon. Pluto, which is a dwarf planet, is what they call it now. The Andromeda Galaxy. Holidays and dates, like July 4th or Independence Day, Passover, New Year's Day, Diwali. Animals like Fluffy, who's a pet cat, or Lucy, a pet dog. Cultural and sporting events. Maker Fair, which is a technology festival. Race, Are We So Different, which would be a museum exhibit. In the FIFA World Cup, which is a football soccer championship. I guess it's wherever you live, whether you call it football or soccer. In which case you wouldn't pronounce it football, you would pronounce it football. But that's here or there. Commercial brands like Microsoft Windows, Google, Coca-Cola, Tim Hortons, Woolworths, that kind of thing. All right. So usually we can recognize proper nouns because, of course, their first letters are capitalized, right? But if you don't know how to capitalize, that doesn't help you. And because they are treated with a sense of importance. However, when you're writing, it's sometimes hard to know whether they're proper nouns, whether you should capitalize them or not. So, for example, let's say you attend a university and take many of your classes in mathematics. Are those classes offered by the Department of Mathematics or the Department of Mathematics? I guess it depends. As always, your audience matters. How important is this particular organization to the person you're writing to? Do you both agree on its importance? So if you're writing a letter to the head of the department, it's probably best to treat it as a proper noun, right? Like if you were writing to me about the Department of English, I'd probably treat it as a proper noun. However, if you're writing an informal email to a friend who takes mostly literature classes, not me, if you're writing to me about the Department of Mathematics, my answer to most math questions are aliens have purple hats. So it's not going to be like, we're talking literature, right? So it would probably be best to write it uncapitalized. So that's kind of your answer with that. All right, so definite articles and proper nouns. Usually we do not capitalize the before proper nouns. Good writing style usually means writing it as little the and not capital the. Knowing which proper nouns need the definite article the can be difficult and is best learned one at a time. There is no perfect rule to help you figure it out either, but in general, we use the definite article if there is a very distinctive noun that we are thinking of. Perhaps the only one of its kind. Sometimes we use a definite article before a proper noun because it's part of the name. We usually use the definite article for plural names, such as the Kardashians, the Philippines, the Great Lakes, the Andes Mountains, but we do not capitalize the in those cases. When the article is specifying a kind or characteristic, either with an adjective or by using of to show possession, the Central Intelligence Agency, the White House, the United States of America, the Statue of Liberty, the Gulf of Siam. Again, no capitalization on the word the. For newspapers, but not magazines or most online periodicals. So you have the London Times, the Sydney Morning Herald. However, there is an exception for the word the, and that is the New Yorker. The New Yorker is the New Yorker. You capitalize it. For rivers, oceans, and seas, but not individual lakes or ponds. The Amazon River, the Black Sea, the Arctic Ocean. So proper nouns for places where the definite article is usually used, like the Bahamas, the Bronx, the Sudan, that type of thing. But again, it's not really capitalized. So here's a common problem with proper nouns. Writers who are trying to make their words sound important tend to capitalize too many nouns. When editing your writing, take a close look at each capitalized word. Is it really a proper noun? Do other people outside your organization capitalize it? Most importantly, is it capitalized in dictionaries? Check the dictionary. Okay. All right. Here normally I would go to proper adjectives about capitalization, but adjectives is right here and it's just one line, so I'm just going to read it. All right. In most U.S. style guides, names of books, newspapers, musical recordings, television shows, movies, and museum exhibits are italicized. So there you go. Okay. That's all there is to it. Now, me and this book disagree about television shows. I feel like most television shows are just quoted in quotes. I don't think I've really ever seen them italicized before. Don't italicize them for me. How about that? Put them in quotes for me. And every instructor is different. And I'll tell you a piece of advice that I was given by another instructor when I was getting my bachelor's, and I have followed it to the T. Whatever your current instructor tells you to do, whether you know it's wrong, can pick up a book and prove it's wrong, it don't matter. Do what that instructor tells you to do. Don't argue. It won't help you, and you can't win. Why? Because we're all autonomous in our classrooms. Just do what the instructor gives you to do. Just do it. Just save the headache and just do it, okay? So we all have our own little quirks, and it's better just not to fight them. All right, so we're going to go on to proper adjectives. All right. Proper adjectives are derived from proper nouns, which are the names of people, places, and things. By proper, we mean specific rather than formal or polite. They allow us to summarize a concept in just one word. Instead of writing cooking done according to French tradition, we can just write French cooking. Proper adjectives tend to be capitalized and are often made with dash. Well, you know, when they write it, they write dash, an. They have endings an, sq, or in suffixes, such as American movies, African restaurant, Victorian era. Sometimes proper nouns behave like proper adjectives and do not take a new suffix, like California quail, Texas barbecue, Wall Street wizard. So, all right. So now we're going to go on to abbreviations. Let's see. It's 134. Y'all gonna have to excuse me. I can't see very well today, so I'm having to struggle a little bit with this tiny print. Okay. Abbreviations are a way to shorten long words and phrases, so we don't have to say the long version every time. They work much the same way pronouns do, in that we don't always want to be saying a proper noun, but instead make it easier by saying he or she, for instance. In fact, abbreviating is one of the major forms of language change. It balances out the very large number of words, new ideas, and long language forms constantly being created. In other words, as we make language longer, we also try to make it shorter. So there's initialisms. Initialisms are made of the first or most important letters of a phrase given together in all capitals, sometimes with periods between the letters and sometimes without. As with acronyms, initialisms often do not assign a letter in the abbreviated form for conjunctions, prepositions, or articles in the original longer form. Nor do the abbreviations letters have to be taken only from the first letter of words. Initialisms are pronounced by saying the individual letters' names. Note that initialism is the preferred term among linguists and lexicographers, but many lay people use the term acronym for this variety of word as well. So, for example, you've seen written EG, which stands for exempli gratia, DOA, dead on arrival, DNA. I'm going to try and say this, but let's just point out that it's been quite a while since I've studied DNA, so I'm going to hope I say this correctly. Deoxyribonucleic acid. I don't think I have enough Latin, and I study Latin literature, but I don't know that I have enough scientific Latin to perfect that. So FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, i.e. id est, LOL, as in laughing out loud, OMG, oh my God, NCAA, excuse me, National College Athletic Association. I know what that is, Roll Tide. USA, of course, for United States of America. And then there's acronyms. Acronyms are made of the first letters of the words in a phrase. Unlike initialisms, they can be written and pronounced as a word. In North America, they are usually written as all capitals. However, in the United Kingdom, they are sometimes written as proper nouns with only the first letter capitalized. So for this one, the antisocial behavior order is called ABSCO here, and it's all capitalized. But in the UK, ASBO is only the first letter A is capitalized. All right, so the acquired immune deficiency syndrome, AIDS, National Aeronautics and Space Administration is NASA. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization is NATO. Okay, you see the difference in initialisms and acronyms? Acronyms are actually pronounced as words, unlike FBI. We actually say the initials. So that's the difference. All right, shortened and clipping. Shortened or clipped words remove letters or syllables, with the remainder sometimes undergoing modification. Like advertisement. Oftentimes it's just called an ad. Cockroach. Many people just call it a roach. I spy. Many people just say spy. Facsimile. Most of the time now it's just called a fax. Gasoline. Many people don't just say, I'm going to go get some gasoline. I'm just going to get some gas. Influenza. Most of the time is just referred to as flu. Most people do not say madam. They say ma'am. Memorandum is a thing of the past. It's just called a memo. An omnibus is no longer called that. It's just called a bus. Parachute, most people just call it a chute now. Spectacles, they're just called specs. And the telephone is no longer called that big long word. It's just called a phone. So blends and portmanteaus, which I believe is French, and I'm probably mangling the tar out of that. So portmanteaus and blends take parts of two words and combine them into a single word. Like costume plus play is now cosplay. Or cosplay. I think you guys call it cosplay, but it's really cosplay. Motor and hotel is now called a motel. Situation plus comedy is a sitcom. Spanish and English, Spanglish. Spoon and a fork is called a spork. Telephone and marathon is called a telethon. I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember the original forgot to mute that phone. Telethons used to be panels of people that would do like TV programs, and they would actually telephone in their pledges to the marathon. All right, pluralizing acronyms and initialisms. Acronyms and initialisms are usually made plural by adding an S, like CD-ROMs, you just add an S. FAQs, you just add an S. MVPs, you just add an S. However, some style guides prefer to use the apostrophe S for initialisms, like ATMs, they put an apostrophe S. I don't know what that one is, so I'm not going to read it. RBIs, they put an apostrophe S. VIPs, lots of times they use an apostrophe S, but it's not necessarily necessary that you do it. The thing that I ask for is that when you're writing, whichever way you use, whether you use the apostrophe S or you do not use the apostrophe S, be consistent. Don't use an apostrophe S here, then not use one here. Whichever style you decide to use, just be consistent in the paper. Okay? All right. Major news organizations and style guides differ on this, and both styles are widespread. As is always the case, use the method preferred by your organization and be consistent. So most instructors are like that. Mostly what we want is consistency. Okay. It's just like with periods. Some people prefer to put periods in between those initialisms, like V period, I period, P period. If that's what you're going to do, okay, but do it all the time. Not partial. Don't do it for two of them, but don't do it for the other one. Consistency. Consistency is the name of the game. Okay. All right. Told you, can't see. I'm having to page 50. All right, date abbreviations. You know what most of them are for January and February, March, April, May, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Not really going to go over those much with you. I guess the weird one is like March is MAR. April, of course, is APR. July is JUL. The short months are kind of weird, right? So sometimes you may have to look those up if you don't use them frequently. The biggest thing about doing them or using them is you don't use them in formal writing. Formal writing, you always spell out the months and days. For informal writing, you just want to make sure that you use whatever style you choose and it's consistent and your readers can understand it. That's why you use the standard grammar abbreviations for months and days. Okay. Just again, consistency. Okay. Now, when you're doing that MLA heading that I've shown you how to do, you always abbreviate the date there. But when you're writing your actual paper, you do not abbreviate dates inside an actual paper, not for an academic paper. Okay. Now, if you're writing an informal email or something like that, then that's fine. But if you're writing, say, you're going from Enterprise State to Troy University, and you're speaking to a professor there about possibly admitting, doing admissions to that college, I would use a more formal tone. I would not abbreviate in that particular email. But now, if you're talking to somebody who is a friend or whatever, then sure, go ahead, abbreviate that thing. Put the numbers in for all I care, because that's an informal email. All right. Right now, we're going to talk about time and the clock for just a minute. In North American English, we use AM, which stands for ante meridiem, meaning before midday for the hours of the day between midnight and noon, and PM, which means post meridiem, meaning after midday for the hours between noon and midnight. The abbreviations can be written several ways, varying capitalization, punctuation, and spacing. As always, when you have choices, try to find out what your boss or teacher prefers and stick to it. You do need to realize that most of Europe and other parts of the world do use the 24-hour clock, what many in the United States calls military time. I'm married to a retired veteran. I was born at Fort Rooker, Alabama. I have lived the military life all of my life, and there is something I dearly hate to do, and that is to count to tell the time. Aggravates me so bad. But, sometimes you have to adapt, right? So you do. But in most of the world, they use that 24-hour clock. And most of our computer systems use a 24-hour clock. So you might run into that when you are writing. It's not so much which system you use as long as you are consistent in which system you use, okay? Again, consistency is the key. Even with the dominance of digital clocks, which have no spinning second, minute, or hour hands, we still keep using the old ways of talking about time derived from clocks with dials and faces. One old-fashioned way of telling time that has hung on for almost 500 years is o'clock, a contraction of the clock. It is used only when the time is exactly on the hour, as in 9 a.m. equals 9 o'clock in the morning. 11 p.m. is 11 o'clock at night. We do not use o'clock if there are minutes after the hour in the time, so it would be wrong to say 9, 10 o'clock. Ugh, doesn't even sound good, does it? So the halfway mark in an hour also has its own terminology, like 7:30, 7:30, 7:30, which is mostly in the UK. We don't usually say that here. We also use quarterly hours in English time telling, especially when estimating time. A quarter hour is 15 minutes, which is used 1/4 of the hour, 60 minutes. So like 9:15, a quarter past 9, at 10:45, a quarter before 11, quarter to 11, a quarter of 11. And normally in academic writing, I would suggest writing it out, and rather than putting 10:45, the numerals. But that's kind of changing in writing, and unless it's like a very formal paper, like an argumentative paper or a literary analysis, I would let it slide. But an argumentative paper or literary analysis, I would not let it slide. Those are very academic papers, and I would not let it slide in those two papers. So keep that in mind. For all other times, we use similar constructions, like 2:55, 5 minutes before 3, 5 minutes to 3, 5 of 3. Since we often give approximate times in English, sometimes we want to emphasize that we are talking about very specific times, like the meeting starts at 3 p.m. on the dot. You'll miss the train if you're not there at 6:20 sharp. Time can be both a non-count noun and a count noun. He called her 5 times. How many times did you run around the track? I need more time to finish my homework. It's about time to leave. So that's the little bit on time. All right. And now we're going to go to numbers as soon as I can find them, because I didn't write my numbers down. Although I know it's on one of these little tabs. Here it is. Sorry about that. Like I said, I'm having a bad sight day, so you'll have to be patient. You wanted the talking lecture back. When you don't have the talking lecture, you can't see me fumble around. All right, numbers. There are 2 main types of numbers in English, cardinal and ordinal. Cardinal numbers are used most of the time, whether you're speaking or writing. They are the counting numbers. They express both positive and negative values. Ordinal numbers usually show the order or sequence of things, such as rankings or dates. They differ in their usage and their word endings. So like cardinal numbers be a 1-to-1 ratio or a 2-to-2 ratio, where ordinals will go like first, second, that type of thing. They got a whole list here to 100, and I'm not doing that. So sometimes people will use the quasi-ordinal nth. The n stands for an unknown number, like for the nth time, do not jump on the couch. The car is perfectly engineered to the nth degree. All right, and then you have partial numbers. There are 2 main kinds of partial numbers, fractions and decimals. Which you use depends on the circumstances. Fractions are common in recipes where traditional, let's take these off. Where traditional measurements such as 1/4 cup or 1/2 teaspoon are likely to appear. Fractions are also more common than decimals in casual conversation, particularly when a quantity is unknown or estimated. In prose, we usually write out the fractions in words and use hyphens to separate the numerals and the words. They are represented as numerals in mathematics, recipes, and formulas. Okay. Decimals tend to be used for precise measurements in scientific, financial, and academic fields. In decimals, there is no numerals in front of the decimal point. If there is not any numerals in front of the decimal point, put in a 0. It makes it easier to notice the decimals. So if you're using fractions, you spell it out. If you're using decimals, you do not. You use the numerals. Okay. So in most writing, such as for school or work, the numbers 0 through 9 should be written out as words rather than as numerals. Numerals 10 and higher should be written as numerals, except when they begin a sentence. If you have a series of numbers that they should all be in the same style, even if some are below or some are above 10. In literary writing, it can be less distracting to the reader to see all numbers as words, and it's often better to use general rather than specific numbers. There's something about the exactness of numbers that can destroy the mood of an emotional bit of writing. Again, I'm not sure I agree with this advice. I have always been taught at the master's degree level that if the number was below 100, you should write it out. It has been my experience that most instructors prefer that if the number is below 100, not 10, that you should write it out. Now, I will leave it up to you what you prefer to do. I would say in my class that if it's under 100, that you should probably write it out. But definitely if it's under 10, because this grammar book just said it, write it out. I would prefer if it was under 100, you wrote it out. I just think it's more aesthetically pleasing to the eye in the printed word to spell the word out. When you're writing an academic paper, unless of course it's scientific, numbers are more jarring. You know, you're reading along, you're reading a story or an explanation or an argument or whatever, and this number just, it messes with your head. Unless it's a specific type of research paper that has a lot of science attached to it, for proof and statistics and this type of thing, unless it's very specific towards that, a number can kind of jar you back out. And if it does that, it's hard to get back into whatever it is you're reading, especially if you're reading something emotional or whatever. If a number throws you out of it, it's hard to reattach back to that sweet spot where maybe you were in that person's writing. That's why I object so much to the actual numerals type of thing. Okay. So just my thoughts. Percentages are best written as numbers, except as noted, except when they begin a sentence. Numbers at the beginning of sentences should always be written as words, even if they are above 9. If it looks too awkward, then rewrite the sentence so the numbers doesn't start things off. There are 2 styles of writing numbers that are 4 digits long. To the left of the decimal, with or without a comma after the thousandth place. Either is fine, but again, be consistent. Okay. Money isn't very different from the previous guidelines, but there are a few places where you need to be alert to common mistakes. Avoid indicating dollars or cents twice. All right. I have seen people write $100.30, and they will write the dollar sign at the front of that and then a cent sign at the end of it. No, that is not how that works. Okay. It's if you have dollars, you have dollars, and it includes the cents. Okay, cents is only 4 cents. I got 30 cents. Or I have 30 cents. I have 30 cents. Okay. The word money is almost never plural in everyday English. Only in the most technical financial situations, such as when discussing a corporation's or a government's budget, is it used. Any of you who are in here taking accounting classes, you'll know what I mean by that. If not, you'll find out if you decide to take any of those accounting classes. But for the most part, it really isn't going to have a place in your writing. For nearly all uses, for most people, it should be just money, even if you're talking about more than one source or kind of money. Okay? And that concludes your lecture for capitalization, italics, abbreviations, and numbers. Bye-bye.